All right, welcome everybody to the airport review panel meeting tonight. We're going to discuss a bunch of different issues. And, the big news for this meeting is the airport terminal's environmental assessment is out and open for review for 30 days, which ends June 2nd, at which time they'll have a 2-hour public comment section, which is going to be challenging to get everybody's comments in that amount of time. But it's also a time I think we can submit comments in writing as well.
Rich, is that meeting going to be in person? That's
I think it's
open
virtual.
meeting? Virtual? Okay.
I thought it was virtual.
Okay.
If anybody has better information,
No.
jump in and say.
It's virtual as far as I know. This is Holly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So just to start things off, we should go through our minutes, which thank you, Brendan, for supplying those. We had a discussion last meeting on April 15th. We talked about the various politician activities that Fitzpatrick had put in a new letter. And Toomey's office had made inquiries to the FAA, but was not planning to sign a letter. And Casey's office, we had heard nothing from. Peter and Robin from TTS were engaging Buttigieg's office, trying to ask for an interview or a session with him to present the topics of our concern. Supervisor Lewis had penned a note to the FAA and received a rebuttal letter, which was more or less the usual talking points that the airport has, but he had put his own 2 cents worth in, and they gave him a response. Well, I'll mention later in kind of new business, but then I penned a letter personally back to the FAA to rebut their comments to John, and just said, come on, get serious. And I'll talk more about that later, but I did respond to their comments about John's because I thought it was really inappropriate the way they were handling their comments to him. Joe's been looking into, as of last meeting, he was listening to the Mercer County budget meeting. And we also mentioned that TTS was in contact with Booker's office. They had sent a letter there. So, and I'll have a few comments from TTS to put in here, and I'm sure Judy can fill us in with more. Sue Herman brought up her concerns about the PFAS and protecting the environment, that their actions at the airport would release that contaminant. So there's quite a bit of discussion about that topic. Judy Huckner gave us an update on the TTS situation. The various people they were talking to, New Jersey DEP, trying to find out if they could trigger a USGS study of the environmental issues associated with the PFAS and the around the Navy site there. They're talking to other commissions and trying to find ways of who has the permitting control and can perhaps affect that. There was some discussion about the difference between an EA and an EIS and who pays for that. And other than that, it was basically administrative stuff of when we'd be meeting again and how the dates were changing. So those are the minutes from last meeting. Can we get a motion to accept? Motion. Second.
Second.
Okay, we're good. Meeting, the minutes are accepted and we can go on. Okay, so just a few updates of things I've been hearing or doing. I did get a new update from Toomey's office. When the letter came back from FAA to John's comments to them, I thought it was pretty lame. So I wrote back to them and just pointed out and said, you say it's a safety issue, but in 2015, when they did the survey of the penetration zone, there were 20 trees that were identified as poking through this imaginary zone. And it's been 6 years and they haven't touched anything. Okay, so, and operations have not abated, they're still operating. So clearly there was no safety issue. How is it that now we're supposed to accept that acres of trees have to be removed in the name of safety, when the original study done 6 years ago, they did nothing? So I pointed that out. I pointed out that in 2016, the FAA said they were approving an increase in the terminal from, I think it was whatever it is now, like 25,000 square feet to 48,000. But they said if it goes up as high as 64,000, then that's probably going to have a significant impact on the area and deserves to be studied. So how can the FAA now say that an increase to 125,000 square feet is no significant impact? I mean, just how can you actually make that statement when you said 64,000 was significant back in 2015? And so, other comments I just pointed out, and just how they can make the comment that these projects are not disconnected when everything they're trying to do is to grow the capacity, and they've already exceeded the capacity. And if all these projects do come together and the capacity jumps enormously, the FAA is just going to say, "Oh, well, isn't that good news?" And we're stuck with a result. So, so I passed that letter on to Senator Toomey's office, and apparently they took those comments and went back. I heard from our liaison that they actually went back to the FAA to make a bunch of those arguments and say, "But you told us it was a safety issue, but what about this?" And so I'm still waiting to hear what came of the second pass through to the FAA with those comments. So we'll see what comes from that. John, have you heard anything from Steve Santasero's office about getting in contact with Casey?
I spoke with Rose Wunschel, and I did speak with the state senator last week, and we are trying to get contact with the local person, Laura Flynn, to get some traction there. She did say they've been slow in the past, or not active in this issue. And so we're hoping, we can get some traction there.
Yeah, I just don't understand why we're getting, I would have guessed we would have had more response from Casey's office than Toomey's, and it's just been the other way.
Yeah,
So,
and quite frankly, and because I've met the senator many times and have great respect for him, I'm somewhat flummoxed that we didn't. And I told the folks that we had talked to, both in Scranton and locally, that a quick no is better than a long maybe, just in terms of resources and allocation.
Yeah.
So it's something we'll go back and continue to press on.
Okay. Okay. So then I think with respect to the EA, the arguments they're making are just all very oriented towards highlighting the growth they expect to occur from these projects, which is contradictory to what they've been saying, that none of these things will have any impact on the the employment numbers or on the community. So they're perhaps, for trying to justify the financial investments, they're coming out and just making the statements pretty plainly that they're going for really big growth. And that to me is the argument we need to go back with and say, look, you're finally admitting it. And one avenue that's being explored by Joe is, can we tell from their budget numbers what the implications are for what they're projecting to be their income from the passenger fees and whatever kinds of income they're expecting to get? Because maybe there's a little hint there that they're saying, we expect these numbers to be this much higher, because they have budget numbers, projections of what their income is going to be, I think. Is that right, Joe?
Yes. Now, let me know when you want to delve into that a little bit more.
I think it's appropriate. Go ahead.
So the problem with it goes back to what we said before the meeting went public, is that because of the federal government's emphasis on infrastructure deficit spending in the terms of trillions of dollars, this is an infrastructure project that is going to generate jobs. When infrastructure projects are done, it's quote for safety or regional growth. So this is going to be one of those regional growth issues that the federal government is happily investing in to quote spend the money and promote job growth, and therefore promote additional the trickle-down economic impact within the Mercer region. So in order to do that, they have, from Mercer County's perspective, I'm going to guess that the potential growth now with 128,000 square foot terminal, that's going to lead to a size that when we put all the particular line items of income into the table, that it's going to project, quote, profitability for Mercer County because they only have a 10% investment. So what I haven't been able to figure out yet is who's actually paying off the bonds. Is the airport going to be directly responsible for principal and interest, or how are they doing that to hide any deficit? I'm not saying they are. I just don't have the answer yet.
Okay.
On the flight side, I actually met with somebody this morning online. One of the guys who does a lot of really good computer development work that I work with, and he just finished a project for a carrier that is strictly not passenger but freight carrier. So he has a display software that is has all the airports in the United States displayed on a spray map. That when I get done, I'm going to take all of the current information, and that's going to be one color of a display to all the airports that they're currently servicing. With all the other information from what they're doing in terms of the expansion, like the cutting the trees. Yes, they're not changing the length of the runway yet, but as Ron pointed out a while back, the cutting those trees is going to allow for a heavier payload, which means more passengers, bigger planes, more gas, and a longer
further destination.
Direct flights to longer airports, distance-wise.
Yeah.
So the second spray of information is going to take the next size plane, and I need to talk to Ron and figure out how to do this in terms of getting the right information. And that'll be the second display is, okay, here's where you are, here's where you plan to be, but in essence, your growth is being built for this. It'll be another display on top of this, just to show the dynamics of what they're really trying to build. And at each one of those three stages, there's an income flow. Then we will match that income flow up with the local debt, remaining local debt, and we'll see what that does in terms of profit or loss. The problem with that is when they superimpose a impact to the local economy on top of that, then the quote loss loses its meaning in terms of the profit or loss of the project, because it's an investment in the community, which the county is going to say it's going to come back to them in other ways in terms of higher fees, taxes, or whatever, higher growth in the region. And that's how they're going to get the money back. So they can spin this any way they want because they're government.
Right.
But that's the outline of where I'm going with this.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think you're right in the view that in the current spending by the government, they're going to say, oh, well, if this helps, let's do it. But if it carries an implication for what they think the growth really is, that implication is part of what we can say justifies trying to get a better look at what the pollution impact is, what the impact is on the community. Because if it's that many more flights, then, you know, that would be the justification to say you're using this 1% growth thing as your argument. And here in your own budget projections imply what you have in your budget projections implies this kind of growth. And that's way out of line, I expect, with what the environmental assessments are considering.
And the way we're going to get around their false argument is by the fact that you're building 128,000 square foot. You're building this for an assumed capacity. And so their argument at 1% growth or whatever they're saying is wrong. Otherwise, they would go back to the 64,000 square foot model.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just to add in, John, a couple of things I'm thinking about when you mentioned that. First, they're more than tripling the amount of stuff that they have for concessions within the airport. I haven't been in the airport in, I think, more than 5 years, but there's none of the standard airport experience stuff where you could actually sit down and get food while you wait for your flight. So there's an element to this where they're going to get revenue because they're going to get higher average revenue per passenger from there. The other thing is once you have the larger terminal and you have additional rental cars, you're going to drive up. Then there's questions about parking and traffic that haven't necessarily been figured in. How many additional car trips are we now going to get because of the increased capacity of the airport? What does that do to traffic, you know, on 295 and the associated roads around there? That's something else I don't think that they've thought of too much or even included. But they could, from an airport experience perspective, by adding the restaurants and lounges and stuff like that, conceivably it could make it a place that could be a temporary layover between flights, like depending on where Frontier goes. But if someone were going to a cheaper destination in Boston area, that they might fly first to Trenton from Miami and then Miami to Boston or something like that, or Providence or one of those ancillary airports. So it could open them up to additional revenue that way that they might not be seeing. So those are things I think we need to kind of highlight in terms of, you know, that they are building this out and that they've been, they're kind of speaking out of both sides of their mouth.
You're absolutely correct, John.
May I jump in, Glenn?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for the comments. I started pouring through the draft documents that are up on Trenton Airport, but the other thing that they do is they say, oh, we have to size the square footage and the gate capacity for the peak hours. Now, they also claim that they do not regularly schedule simultaneously arriving flights, but that everything is sized for sort of the rare instance when simultaneously arriving flights happen. But notice that there's 4 gates. Notice that that taxiway is, and even say it in their executive summary, that taxiway is capable of handling an additional 4 flights queued up. And in addition to the gate area, part of the expansion plan is waiting room area to connect the waiting room to the planes waiting out on the tarmac to hit the gate. So that's one factor. You know, Joe, as you look at the financials, that's just a red flag that you might be able to latch onto.
Absolutely. The stacking issue is the main key to say, okay, here's what your real capacity is. Right. And when you go back and look at any other airport that's seasoned, even if you take LaGuardia, okay, I'm sure we're not going to have that as many flights as LaGuardia, but there's a maximum capacity that we can demonstrate without being outrageous to say, here's where you're going.
Right. And
And
of course,
you're admitting it by the way you're building your structure. You don't build, anybody in business knows you don't build a planned capacity for, let's say, 100,000 units if you're only going to manufacture 20,000 units a month. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
yeah, exactly. And of course, they claim that they're going to hit their peak like 1 hour during the day, and of course that's baloney. As you just said, nobody resources a facility like that to handle an occasional peak. Your goal is to fill up the peak as much as possible, and so when you run those numbers, you're going to get an entirely different story.
And that's exactly what we're going to do with this model is based upon the current flight patterns and using other data at other airports, superimpose a more likely scenario for the number of flights based upon the capacity.
Yep, it makes sense. I think the double, to me, this is kind of a two moves ahead chess game, right? I think that by pushing on the finances, we push them to admit that the finances there has to be more income coming in order to justify the finances. But then when you talk about having that additional income, you're talking about a whole different, real environmental impact and impact on the community that then you can't turn around and deny. So I think this is the corner we need to push them into.
The other thing that dramatically increases their passenger volume is the increase in holding space.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have one holding room now, and they'll have 4. They're quadrupling their holding space, so they can hold people in the terminal and then on the taxiway. And anyway, that's
Okay. So yeah, I mean, hopefully we can at least use that to highlight what they think their capacity is going to be, that it's way out of line with what's been done for the environmental analyses, and whether we can get one of the licensing, the DEP or another organization that has to issue permits or licenses, to flag that. That's really one of our avenues, because I really believe the commissioners want to see this terminal happen. And so they're not going to be dissuaded by public comments. I'm not sure if the FAA will listen to the comments and issue a revision of the EA to say, we're going to force this analysis to be done for the environmental impact of that capacity. I'm not sure what the end games are that are possible here. But
if I could just make a quick comment, Rich. Basically, the hearing and the comments, the reason why they're so critical is that all comments by law have to be attached to the EA as part of the hearings. And by law, the FAA has to respond to each of those questions or comments. Now, they can group them together. They can answer them in a very tertiary way, which they've done in the past. But the important thing is that the comments stay attached to the document, because what will probably happen, and I'm not trying to be a downer Donna here.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm being a realist, and I'm usually an optimist, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to take our comments and they'll plow through them and they'll give answers because by law they have to, and then they're going to issue a NEPA. a FONSI, and that gives them permission to move on unless there's some other recourse that takes place.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, they've got their ducks in a row. And this is just a practice that they have to do. Now, my question is, if the EPA has any teeth anymore and becomes aware of this, if they then have an avenue to pursue this because of the nature of how this has been done. I don't know, and I don't know if we have enough time to pull that together. But the comments are really critical, because if anything ever to happen, let's say they don't say a Fonzie, but it's got to be out there so that it's attached to the original EA for the record.
Will they take written comments if we get a letter from Senator Toomey's office or
They're
from?
supposed to.
Okay, so it's not just the 2-hour window where everybody's got to jam in.
No, and the 2-hour window, there's a disadvantage because they're going to cut it off. By
Right.
law, technically, they are not allowed to cut it off if they have people waiting to make comments. But we know from the past that they have. They've limited or they've just said, we're done and submit your comments. So we're in a situation here of how do we make them accountable for those comments when A, it's a virtual meeting, and B, they're accepting comments and we don't know if they're ever going to address them, nor do we actually get to hear or be part of any comments that are being made outside of the ones that we submit. And puts the public at a great disadvantage.
Very well said.
Well, so,
So we need to make sure the comments that we're making, either as individuals, as grassroots organizations, as governmental officials, which is the reason why I'm trying to have a meeting on Monday about this, is that we cover as many aspects of this. And John's done a great job getting contact with people none of us have been able to reach, is that they have to either A, show up, which I think they should try to show up, and somehow get in there. I've asked Kyle if there's a way they could pre-register so that they're at the top of the list and not at the end of the list. But we need politicians to be there and say, I'm representing a constituency of XXX, and make 2 or 3 points, document it, and move on.
right. In response to a question from Kyle, I said, he was saying, well, what do you want us to do? Do comments to the FAA or comments to this meeting? I said, well, both. We need the public comments on the record, but I believe the actual, more than just a letter, but some sort of contact to the FAA personally, I have heard could make a difference, just to get a little more attention to our concerns. So,
I mean,
So
the fact that they're still
Right.
asking us
this,
what they're supposed to be doing is a little bit challenging to comprehend. So that's what I hope at Monday's meeting, I can sort of say, this is what we're expecting you all to do at your various levels to help your constituents out here.
Right.
They need to know in New Jersey, there are politicians that are looking at this and have some serious questions about the ethical and accountability of how this whole project is unraveling, is coming about. Because
Yeah.
we're in Pennsylvania and we are at a great disadvantage because we're in Pennsylvania and this round really is focusing on New Jersey. So the politicians can make it uncomfortable because if they find out, if they see there are representatives from local, state, and federal at that meeting from Pennsylvania, they're going to have to take notice.
Holly, I'm going to be the Debbie Downer and say the politicians are going to give lip service to it, at least the local ones in Jersey, because the strengths are so hard for incumbents that there's no risk to them stepping out of line and taking a stand for non-growth. It just isn't going to happen. So there's no risk to them to step out in the winds and make a position.
Agree.
Well, that's why I think it's got to be to impact the if the FAA is getting all these comments, they need to see these comments and ask the questions about, how is the pollution being addressed, or ask the regulators, how are we going to issue these permits if we don't address these issues? So, I mean, I don't think there's any point in trying to sway the commissioners. Gee, a Pennsylvania, representative of some sort made a comment. It's like, okay, you ready to vote yes? Yep, let's go. it's going to have to be some other forcing function, I think.
Some other government body that has some teeth
Right.
through EPA or whatever it is to say this is wrong. Environmental people, no matter what party they're really on, are the strongest ones to try and stop something, whether it's a frog hatchery in a wooded land in Lower Makefield or whatever it is. These guys come out of the woodwork and speak their mind.
I've heard people say EPA a couple times tonight. Or do you mean New Jersey DEP, or are you suggesting we're actually trying to contact the EPA?
I'm referring to the federal level.
Okay, because I don't think we've ever reached out to them with any kind of comment.
Well,
So
the first, I mean, just as background, the first round, the EPA was heavily involved with FAA approval of airport expansion. And then through various administrative dismantlings, the EPA lost all of its power. And that's how this has proceeded the way it has, because there's been no connection between the FAA, which is now a business growth, airport airline growth business, as opposed to a monitoring function. And EPA has no say in it, as far as I know.
okay, so is there no point to going to the EPA?
Well, and now I don't know, because we have a new administration. I don't know what kind of teeth the EPA has. I don't have any contacts, unfortunately, with the EPA now. I used to,
Well,
but I don't now.
I mean, if the EPA contacts the FAA and the FAA says, oh, these projects aren't segmented, oh no, it's 1% growth, we would be telling the EPA, hey, you got to go beat up on your buddies over there, because we think they're not telling the truth. I just don't know if that's going to get anywhere. We can try.
Could it hurt?
No, I mean, we can take the talking points we've got about what the growth is going to be, and that no one's monitoring what the impact of the increased traffic is, and just say, can you evaluate, take a look at this. So I think it's worth a try, and we could have, I'm sure we can get Kyle to get a letter issued to the EPA, and maybe the Board of Supervisors can send a letter to the EPA and say, hey, these are the concerns we have about our community. And New Jersey DEP, as pointed out by Alan Dresser, who's on the EAC for Lower Makefield, there are air pollution goals that they're supposed to achieve over there. And if this threatens that, that's something that ought to catch their attention and, raise a concern.
Right.
And that
Go ahead,
guy
John.
Shaw never wrote back to me. It's been 2 months now, and I never got acknowledgement of my letter.
From whom, John?
Head of the acting commissioner of the DEP, New Jersey DEP.
Oh, wow.
So
Right.
I got nothing.
Well, maybe what we could possibly do is try to get through TTS and through Peter, get Menendez's office to send a similar letter to the New Jersey DEP and just say, raise the same issues and say, we're hearing these are concerns of our citizens. They couldn't be quite so dismissive of a New Jersey senator, I don't think. And I don't know if we can get that through, but we make a note of that.
Or I could call him out on Twitter.
There you go, John. Go for it.
So no response from New Jersey DEP. All right. Just making some notes. Okay, Joanne, do you have any other comments you'd like to make about the EA or the process here? You're muted.
I don't have any other comments.
Okay. All right, so let's go around the table here. Glenn, did you have anything else to add other than the one budget comment you made?
No, just that, again, reading the executive summary and delving into the documents, they are conspicuously they're conspicuously unaligned in terms. They're egregious. They're unaligned in terms of they're still using growth projections from like 2018, which are pre-pandemic, but those growth projections don't match up with with the real growth as we were talking about earlier. I just think there's so much inconsistency in their own documentation that it's helpful to point it out and get it in the public record. So I'm working on some highlight things, and if I can be helpful in that, I'm certainly happy to help.
Okay. Brendan, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
All right. Judy, I think that's you on, correct? Judy Hockner? Okay. Well, I see you, Judy, but she's muted.
It's muted.
Okay, let me move on. Carol, I don't think we've talked to you before.
Hi, I'm unmuted now.
Here to me.
Hi.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Well, go ahead, Judy.
Okay, I didn't realize I could unmute myself the whole time.
Give us an
All right.
update on. Okay.
All right, let me just comment on
All
what
right,
I
so
heard.
it's your turn to. Yep.
Can you hear
okay.
me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yes.
I agree with your whole conversation about the EPA. This is a NEPA document, and I do believe that it's time to put some pressure on the EPA to point out what they're doing there in terms of underestimating their growth, ignoring the cumulative projects. So I do think we need to kind of work that avenue. All your comments about trying to find conspicuously unaligned flights, I think would be very helpful. And if you find some, share them, because we need to put all that in the public comments for the EA. And definitely public comments will be received until June 16th in writing. And it's very, I believe, very important that they be put in writing. I do believe that a show of people, enough people to show concern at the hearing is important. That's just my opinion. I don't have anything to base that on. But the FAA will note if there's not a lot of comments. I couldn't come up with a number as to what demonstrated significant controversy. Was it 500, 1,000, 10,000? What was the number where the FAA go, well, there's really a lot of controversy, but they will note if there's low turnout. So
Okay.
that is important to have that. And Holly's right. They will bucket each of these comments and have one response, even if 200 people say it, but they're going to have to note that 200 people said it.
Mhm.
And I think we can get those kind of numbers. I mean, once we had 300 people write to the LMT supervisors about
Right.
the airport. So, and this is, higher urgency.
Mhm.
One thing I'll say is there's only one hearing and it's virtual. And I don't know if you can have non-virtual meetings yet, but it was suggested to me that if we wanted to have a hearing in PA, that we would have to pay for it, number one, but that it is, I'm not sure it's too late to ask for it, but our politicians can ask for a hearing in PA. I guess they had a hearing for the RPZ at the library years ago that I don't remember actually. And I'm not sure who paid for that. It might have been New Jersey. But kind of who pays for these hearings is a little bit of an issue because New Jersey's not going to pay for a hearing in Pennsylvania. But I think it's something that we have the right to request. Be interesting to see if we could request a real, not a virtual one, a real meeting, and to see how many people you could get to show up. The lawyer I spoke with, you probably know this, that the two things that the FAA will listen to is the law and Congress. So you're on the right path to try to get our representatives in Pennsylvania to put in any kind of pressure that they can on the FAA to look at how this is being conducted. So, I mean, all these steps that you're taking are the right ones. anybody have a connection with Robbie Ballounis?
Don't know the
Yes.
name.
Rob Ballounis
John.
is a staffer for Senator Casey, and he helped
Right.
arrange the meeting with a woman in Scranton.
And that's Laura Flynn?
No, it's not Laura Flynn. Laura Flynn actually lives in Lower Makefield, and I've called her a couple times and gotten no response. So,
Okay, because Robbie, you know, he's from Yardley Hunt.
yeah.
And not, I mean, I personally knew him as a child. I'm just wondering, you can at least get an
Good
answer
kid.
from him. As
Good
to
guy.
where does Casey stand? Pardon?
He's a wonderful guy. He's a great guy, and he's been helpful. He got us the first meeting, and has, you know, I think done what he can.
So he can't help us figure out where Casey stands, or you know, like you said, the quick no or the long maybe, to try to get, at least if we're going to get something from them.
Yeah, I think it's out of his hands. It's now with Laura Flynn or Lara Flynn. So, and that's
Okay, got it. So it's already been there. And we talked about, I do think this idea of the PA politicians pressuring the New Jersey DP is not a bad idea. But I think, and you're right about the fact that we can show that they're underestimating it, and like Alan Drescher said, and show that the planes will reach a point where the indirect emissions from the planes could be something they have to be concerned about, is where we have to go with that. Because in general, the New Jersey DP has very little to do with any permitting at the airport.
Okay.
And I haven't actually seen, it should say in the, I believe it'll say in the EA, which I haven't read through yet, who has to give the permits, whether New Jersey DEP has to give any permits. Let me think if there's anything else. So going with the idea that we believe that a number of public comments is important, we're trying to make sure that all affected parties and residents in New Jersey are fully aware that this is not a replacement of an old building, which is how Brian Hughes markets it. It's at least we know, we just went through the numbers, right? It's at least a 4 times capacity increase on the terminal, and with the taxiways, a huge increase in capacity for the airport itself. So.
Okay.
And Joe, you had mentioned how they're going to pay for the bonds. You probably, I'm sure you're aware that they'll pay for it with PFCs. And I don't know if we have to break up the principal and the interest, but they have to get approval to use the PFEs to pay down the bonds.
Well, I think that's already in their plan.
Got it. Okay. All right. I don't see anything else in my notes other than to say,
Okay.
Last thing I'll say is that anything, okay, so if you have a legal, in case there's a lawsuit that challenges an eventual FONSI, anything in public comments can be used. So it is, I believe, not being a lawyer, but it is important to make sure that there's anything that, if you think there's anything you want to bring up, like the segmentation or like all the other things, the things we talked about that they haven't taken into account. If we're going to try to put as much in as we possibly can, but that can be brought up later if it's in public comments.
Okay.
Because if it's not in public comment, you cannot bring it up later.
That is my understanding as a non-lawyer.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And that they're going to
Even
look
if
for, go ahead.
Even if it's not written, you mean even if we have written comments that have gone in?
I'm saying, I'm only speaking about written. I'm assuming nothing's going to be recorded at the hearing, that it's just a show of force, that I can't imagine. The only way to record it is in written public comment. Yeah, I've never, I don't ever remember seeing in the RPZEA that this is the comments recorded from a hearing, ever. I think it was only at what was written.
Okay.
Judy, point of clarification on the comments, if I could, real quick.
Yeah.
Are they the comments that they destroyed every third day?
No, that's the call in for complaint line for the airport. This,
Okay.
If you go back to the RPZEA, everything that you ever write in is recorded there. There was, I think, 500 pages. And they have to respond to it. They will bucket it, like particularly if people send in form letters, they will bucket all those and say, okay, this many people asked this question and this is the answer. So that, I believe, is where it's important that you get recorded, and they have to, like Holly said, they have to respond. They have to acknowledge that you have done written comment, and they have to respond. They don't, and then how they respond is where if they, capricious and egregious, however they make their decisions is how there might be a vulnerability.
Thank you.
So.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, honestly, I think maybe a letter that's in parallel to New Jersey DEP and EPA to identify the possible non-compliance because of the air pollution to New Jersey DEP, and point it out to EPA with all the issues about the segmentation and the lack of accurate growth projections. Maybe we put them to both of them. Okay.
Yeah, we need as many people as possible to get letters in, obviously.
And just let me just jump in about this hearing, because I'm still trying to understand how this hearing is going to work. Because the hearing is from 7 to 9, but they're doing a presentation. And how long is that presentation? And then how long are they allowing for quote unquote comment? And how are they going to control the comment, even other than the fact they're opening it at 6:30 for people to register? So this hearing's a little wonky because legally they are supposed to record the hearing and all comments within that hearing. So this is what I've been trying to get some clarification on that, and I've gotten no responses anywhere about how this 2-hour thing is going to be, the creation of the world in 7 days or less.
So Holly, who are you asking that question to?
I'm thinking outside the box. I've gone to the engineers. I've called Mercer County, even though technically it isn't them per se. But no one has. They just say, well, you've gotten public notice, and that's all the information. I'm like, well, you're going to spend 2 hours presenting and then taking comments, and that's it?
Well, see if, I don't know who actually runs that. Maybe Kyle Menendez can call the FAA because he seems to have a connection. All I know is that one of the commissioners said you shouldn't cut it at 2 hours. You should make it longer, but who knows if they're going to do that. Because it's funny, I thought the FAA was going to run this. You think it's Urban Engineers who's going to run it?
No, but Urban Engineers has put a lot of and the comments are going to Urban Engineers. You look at the public comment, it says you could send it into mail to Urban Engineers in New York.
So they must have to compile it. And then I guess it's true. And then I guess Urban Engineers really is the one who responds. That's right. And the FAA has to approve that response.
Correct. So I'm just trying to understand how logistically this meeting is going to work, because when we did this, the first time around, public comment, there was no presentation. It was public comment. People came in with boxes, and we had orchestrated who was going to touch which specific things we objected to. So there wasn't a lot of duplication. Of course, when you have the public come, you can't control what they're going to talk about. But public comments in written form is very important. But like you said, Judy, they have to see numbers show up at this public hearing.
Yeah, I agree. But do you think that they
or not? They notice if people are coming to see the quote unquote presentation, and they still have time after that public comment presentation thing in early June to make comments. So it's critical that you don't have to attend and make a comment, but we physically need people to show up. I mean, not physically, virtually physically, whatever the term is these days. to show up. So they see this is something that, you know, you're not going to railroad this thing through.
They're going to railroad it through. It's just a question of, you know, do you have a, you know, long term, there's things they're doing over there. They're using permitting that says there's no public controversy. I mean, I would like to get to the point where you say to somebody, I don't know, it's the FAA, and you say, clearly there's public controversy and you have to stop using categorical exclusions and all these things that takes no review.
Right.
So
I just,
there's a lot of reasons.
I'm going to, actually, I'll send a note to Kyle tonight and just say, you know, here's the deal, Kyle. I don't know if you've looked, but, you know, can you get clarification on how this meeting is supposed to run? Because I don't want to get tied up in my own knickers on Monday with politicians when we want to try to focus their energy to A, show up and make a comment, because that's a double whammy, or at least make a written comment. Frankly, I'd like them to be at the head of the line.
Yeah. Can you find out whether or not they're going to limit the length of time of speaking? I don't know if it's like a commissioner meeting where they cut you off.
They'll say 2 minutes, I bet you.
Wow.
And if it's like that last meeting,
You
guys,
know all this beforehand.
the last meeting I was at, they seeded praise for what the airport was doing. And those people got to the head of the queue to praise the projects before people were allowed, as I recall, that meeting at the hotel over in Ewing.
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I will touch base with Kyle just to see if there's anything he can bring to the table. I just think it's important that we try to, you know, get people to show up in the Hollywood squares, a lot of them. I mean, it'd be great if we outdid the Zoom and they had to roll it over to YouTube, which is when you have large attendance, that's what happens. But also to write comments, but they don't have to write. That's what our announcement is going to say when Brian releases it. You don't need to make a comment, but we need you there. I mean, this is it. You need to be there. So.
But we have to encourage all those people to make public comment, because I'm afraid
that's the second email after the comment piece. We will follow it up with
but,
that.
But I wouldn't say you don't need to.
No. I'm just saying that we've got the wording that says, you know, if you want to, you should, but we also need you physically just to be there.
But I would even make it stronger than if you want to, you should. We need that. We need a volume of letters as well as people there. I mean, I think we need both, and we need more letter. We need them, you know, to flood them with letters as well as having tons of people there.
Yeah. That's the intent.
But just be careful of the wording.
That's the intent of what Graham will be doing.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Graham, for that.
All right. Thanks, Judy. Carol, would you care to make any comments?
Well, I'm kind of new to the meetings, but I've been concerned about this for a long time. And the last meeting that you had, I was listening in, and I did start writing letters. I have a question. How is this word going to get out to people so that there is a big group?
Well, there's two avenues that are, you know, kind of the broadcast, and one is the BRAM email list, which Holly's managing, and the other would be from Trenton Skies, which would get to the New Jersey folks.
Okay.
And a lot of the New Jersey folks are on the BRAM list as well. I'm not sure if there's any other avenues that are being pursued. Judy, do you know anything else?
I do, but is anybody else going to speak? Does anybody else have something to say? I mean, obviously,
Well, we're working on an editorial with the hopes that it gets in the Courier Times. To remind people that it's coming and here's how to, you know, get in. I don't know if they'll do that because that's technically a public announcement. We may just say, you know, if you're interested or you want more, you know, put our contact information. We have to figure out the best way to do it so they'll accept the editorial. Again, that's another political game to play with. It was listed in the newspaper, but who pays attention? And it's quite a lengthy public announcement, but who's paying attention to that? Don't know, Carol.
Could it be put in the television news?
I don't know, but it could be put in the patch.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people read the patch.
Okay.
I don't know how to do it in the patch because the patch is a very interesting media outreach thing because people think it's a newspaper, but it really isn't. So if someone would want to find out how that's done, I think that would be effective. They tend to glom onto catchy news items, and then they bring them up to the front with a headline. And their turnaround is very quick.
I would think this would be something they'd want to do because it is important, and it's it has to do with the environment and a lot of other issues. As far as the environment goes, is there does the law require that they do an environmental study, which from what I understand, they really haven't done it yet?
They've done what they call an environmental assessment, and that's what's open for public comment. And they're going to come out and say they find no significant impact based on their growth projections and that sort of thing. And that's the kind of thing we're trying to fight.
Mm-hmm.
So they did that for the runway protections.
They're only looking at the airport, like the airport, where the airport is. They haven't gone 1 inch outside of the airport grounds.
Are they required
well,
to
and they're only
by law?
Not by law, but
Common sense.
yeah, common. Yeah,
The-
right. And they did it before.
well, the thing of it is, Carol, is they'll do an analysis like the way it worked for the runway protection zone, which is their way of trying to get rid of buildings and clear out trees, is they go to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection and just say, what's the impact of us removing these trees on the environment? And they'll say, well, we're going to study it to see if there's any, particular owls or endangered creatures or something. And somebody studies that and comes back and says no. And they say, well, as long as you have a mitigation plan for the drainage, it's probably okay. And there's never, the DEP admits readily that there's no one looking at the impact of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no process that forces that to happen. That's what's so aggravating, is that you could say, what if they quadruple the number of planes that are going? Well, it's obviously a lot more pollution, a lot more noise, but there's nobody looking at it from that perspective. They only look at it, when they do the terminal EA, it'll be, well, what's going to happen with the water runoff from the terminal? What's going to happen with, the building construction? They're not going to look at it from what the capacity of the airport is. And that's what our complaint is. One of our main complaints is all these projects together are going to have a huge effect, but their environmental assessments are based on unrealistic growth projections that aren't tying that together. That's the essence of the problem.
Okay.
But-
I would like to, I'm a big letter writer, and I think it really makes a difference, if enough people are involved. And I'm wondering if, besides the FAA, who else should people be writing to?
Well, perhaps the New Jersey DEP,
Okay.
writing to our politicians. You could write to Casey's office and say, we would like to be represented by you. Since we voted for you and you're in office, why aren't you responding? Write to our local politicians and say, we need you to stand up for us. And this has to happen, within weeks. So for them to make their public comments, that's got to happen in, on the order of a month. And so I would write to the politicians, the federal politicians.
Mhm.
And so anybody else suggestions?
And Carol, you're aware of, have you looked at the terminal area, the EA draft on the
No.
Mercer website? Okay, so it's very important to send letters to this McFarland Johnson in Birmingham, New York, or I think the address for the, yeah, guess they're getting the responses. So that's where the response that's going to be recorded goes.
Oh, okay.
Is to that EA. So go on to the Trenton Mercer Airport website and take a look at that environmental assessment. It's 200 pages, so
Oh my God.
it'll be your bedtime reading if you skim it, even if you skim it. But you'll see how to respond in there, and
Okay.
that's the one that's legally recorded.
Okay. What's the date for this hearing?
June
June
2nd.
2nd.
June 2nd.
Okay.
And Bram's email blast, which will go out, today's Wednesday, Friday, is actually going to have an attachment to the public notice because that notice was pitiful. Chock full of information, but in, 6-point type, stuck way in the back of the newspaper. So we figured out a way to be able to attach that so that people could read it, have links, and everything will be right in it.
Okay.
So,
All right.
Carol, I have some important things I want to add here. And Carol, I'd like your contact information if I can get it.
Sure.
I live in Yardley, but I've been active with a group that's active in New Jersey now who have delved into a lot of the details of the airport design. First of all, we're putting out a mailer that's going to go out to New Jersey, but I intend to send it also to Pennsylvania. Particularly anybody directly affected by the planes now. I mean, clearly more people will be. And in it is the website. It's an alert. It's an information, right? That a lot of people don't even know what's going on over there.
Right.
And it'll have where to submit comment. And if you go to the EA, it's the very last page. You go down to public comment, you go all the way to the bottom, and right there is the email and the address where to submit public comment. And the Trenton Threatened Skies website also has how to submit, and then it will have suggested comments, because ultimately you're right, we're looking for this EIS, environmental impact statement, but let me clarify something I said the last meeting because I don't think I was very clear. There has been almost never a time when an EA was failed by the FAA where they found no significant impact. They would go back and mitigate an EA, they might revise it, but they've never failed it so that the failure caused it to go to an EIS. There are many times when there's an EA that goes to an EIS because you can't do an EIS before you do an EA. But there has never been a time when it's failed. But what we will try to do is force them to go to the EIS, even though their findings will not find that it's legally necessary for the FAA to do that. Assuming that we don't find something in the comment period. And your ideas of the patch and anybody, I mean, really, the Yardley mayor should be, if he's not on the call today, he really should be alerted, and he should be doing what he can to alert all his people in Yardley because they're really going to get hit.
Absolutely.
And I don't know him.
Not the Yardley mayor, but David Bria, and I haven't gotten a response from him. The Yardley mayor is pro Mercer County.
He's what? He's pro airport?
Uh-huh.
But does his people know that? Does the people he represent know that?
Definitely.
So I mean, there's
I don't live in the borough, so I can't.
Well, there may be somebody who's bothered by the planes now who can. I mean, and the mayor is not the only person who communicates with the town. You're right, Carol. People don't know, and they need to be alerted in social media, in network blogs. I mean, if there's ways to get on the next door neighbor and get the buzz going so that people know. And if you want, I mean, people will respond negatively, but some of them will. I mean, they'll use the terminology used by the airport that's coded to make it sound like all they're doing is replacing an old building. They'll say we're not expanding the runway. Well, they'll never need to expand that runway because the taxiways and the airfield changes will give them all the capacity they'll ever need. We're not expanding we're not expanding because it's the same footprint. Well, they don't need to expand it. They already bought up the land that they need around them. So that's been done. So they'll try to say there's a code that they're using that we need to counter and be prepared to counter, to alert people as to what this is their opportunity to get their voices heard until June 16th.
How about Facebook and a lot of social media?
Excellent. That's a great idea. Social media. We're trying to ramp that up in New Jersey, but New Jersey hasn't had, all the many years of Pennsylvania and Bram alerting the people and developing a pretty good email blast list. It just hasn't gotten that. This came on very quickly, and it's very hard to understand what the airport's doing, and so it takes a lot of time just to try to figure out what they're doing, because it's all cloaked, and they make it very hard to get any answers as to what they're doing. So the New Jersey people don't know, really.
Yeah, well, I've talked to neighbors, and they'll say, "Oh, that's so convenient, that airport. I like that it's there." And I'll try to say to them, some of the problems that have come up and the concerns that a lot of people have. So a lot of them just don't know, like you said, what this all means.
Just ask them, what's the cost of that convenience? I mean, they say they save a couple $100, a couple times a year, but yet they'll have planes every morning, evening, and during the day for the rest of their lives if they live here. Right. And what's the cost of that convenience? And if you're clever, maybe you can come up with ways to put that on Facebook and express that.
Yeah, any help like that would be appreciated.
Okay.
John, I have a question for you.
Go ahead, Joe.
John, when's the next Board of Supervisors meeting?
The next Board of Supervisors meeting is Wednesday, May 19th. We were talking about this, I was talking with Supervisor Grenier today. If you would like the supervisors to write a letter, and that's something to.
I'm thinking that Rich and I, and anyone else, I'll reach out to him and ask if we can have a few minutes to make a public announcement about our progress and what's going on, and the urgency of just make a public announcement we need to get more people to understand the problem. We can take a few minutes to summarize all these conversations into a one-page bullet point, at least to get people's attention enough to say here what the problem is, and see if we can, at least let the township know.
Yeah, we'd like to be on the agenda, and if they're not going to put us on the agenda, if they vote that down, then we would come in for public comment or at your supervisor's report. But I think we should make the township aware at the public meeting of what the issues are, what the dates are. And I would like to request that the supervisors on a township letterhead send a letter in for this purpose.
So I'm your liaison, and so a couple things. One, you'd have to vote as a panel to say that you want to do that, okay? And I can bring it to the chair, and if the chair places it on the agenda, that would be helpful. If the chair does not, I can certainly bring it up in my supervisor's report or even in other business. And if you had a draft letter you were looking for, that would be helpful, because that's the last meeting before June 2nd.
Right.
Which would be the deadline.
I'll get you that letter.
So my idea was I can give you, I just started to take my old letter to Mr. LaTourette, who I followed up with again while we were talking. I figured I'll ping that guy again before I go on Twitter and shame him. But I can make it accessible if you want to draft online and come up with something that if everybody feels comfortable with, then you can say, okay, this is where our letter is. And because the agenda is likely to be set Friday of this week. So if you have a vote that says we would like our response letter to be considered, and you have the final by Friday, and if virtually all the members of the group have had a chance to weigh in on the letter, then I can present it to the other supervisors.
Let's do a quick
I
vote.
make a motion that we ask John Lewis to ask Dan Grenier, the chair of the BOS.
Oh, he's not the
put
chair.
us on the, who's the
It'll
chair
be
this year?
Susan Blundy. It'll be Susan Blundy.
God. All right, we'll ask Susan Blundy for her gracious blessing to allow us to speak and put us on the agenda, and then also asking for approval of the letter to be entered as John suggested.
Okay.
Okay, I'll
I'm a yes. Judy's a
I'll
yes.
second that motion.
Okay. So Brendan,
I vote positively for that as well.
okay, so we've got 4 positives and
We have 4.
Peter's not on. But we've
But
got
we have 4.
yeah.
We have 4 of the 5.
So then, so you can send me an email that says the board voted 4-0 in favor of the Board of Supervisors considering this response letter to the board, to the,
Yeah.
okay, to urban
Got it.
engineers.
Okay.
And to place us on the
I'll send
agenda,
you that
to make
email.
a public statement.
Yeah. And I'm going to send, the township uses the Microsoft Office platform. And I'm going to see if I can give you the ability to go to and edit a file that I just started for you so that you could work on it virtually. Everybody would have access to it.
Okay.
And then that way, you know, everybody has a fair shot at making edits or changes or anything like that.
That'd be excellent.
John, when is the BOS going to move back to live meetings? I mean, everybody's vaccinated, everything's being lifted, and here we are still in June of 2020.
Joe, I would welcome the opportunity to go back to live meetings. At this time, I have not gotten any direction from the chair, the township manager, about when that might occur. I'm hopeful that it's soon. Like you, I'm fully vaccinated and ready to meet again in person with mask inside if necessary. But yeah, no, I'm would welcome that. But this is where I have to explain I'm one of 5 and I don't want to speak for other members.
Oh, I totally understand.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I know we have to drag one of them back from Florida in order to do them in person too. So that's probably a problem too.
On the advice of counsel.
I'm going to.
Hey, John, for what it's worth, thank you so much for your help. This means a lot to us and means a lot to me. So thank you.
Yeah.
Or second what Brendan said.
But
Last person on that hasn't commented, Dee, would you like to say anything?
You can unmute yourself if you want to say something.
Tell them it's star 6 if they don't know.
Star 6, D?
Well, is she on a call or is she just on?
Don't know.
Is it somebody just identified by the letter D?
No,
It is D.
2 E's following that.
Hearing nothing from D, I make a motion that we close the meeting.
Can I ask one more question though?
No.
Can you? No, I would hope that each of the Lower Makefield supervisors would plan to show up at this meeting, and again to protect the citizens of Lower Makefield who are going to be the ones who are really going to suffer from this. Does that need to be a specific request, or do we think that on their own that they're going to recognize the need for that?
The challenge you have is that coincides with the township meeting on that exact date and time.
Well, if we, no matter how we present ourselves at the next meeting, we can ask the chair to move the following meeting so all the members of the BOS can attend this very critical, important meeting to for the township residents
Okay.
to show the dates.
Well, if we can get a letter on township letterhead out, we'll probably be ahead, but I doubt that they're going to move their meeting to support this unless.
Well, we're going to, I think we can ask them just to see what their willingness is to really support this, this community effort that really is going to impact the township for the next 30, 50, 100 years, which I won't be here to appreciate.
They could dial in and put their phones on mute and just be present, but not attend. Okay, so I second Joe's move.
There is that, Rich. You can dial in. There's, you know,
Well, yeah.
they don't know what you're doing.
That's right. So, I mean, if you want a lot of people there, it doesn't mean you have to listen for the whole 2 hours, but okay, Joe, I'm going to second your motion to close the meeting, and we've got letters to write and things to do, and
People to
Right.
see.
we've got our marching orders. So, and Dee,
And I'd like, Carol, do you know how to contact Carol? Because I don't.
You might have my email.
You're on the grand mailing, aren't you, Carol?
Yeah. That's how I found out about this.
Okay,
Okay.
So, Holly, do you know her last name? Can you give me her contact information?
I'll ask Dawn, but I should be able to pull that. It's okay to share it, Carol, yes?
Yeah, Judy, I'm your neighbor right down the street.
Carol, what's your last name?
Wieland, W-I-E-L-A-N-D.
Okay, obviously, Carol. Hello, Carol. Okay, I wasn't sure. All right, thank you. All right,
All right, thank you all.
Before you
Thank
sign
you.
A big thank you to all of you. Thank you so much.
and click on what I sent
And
you.
John, again, I'm going to also issue my thanks for your support.
Oh, no worries. Before you leave, can you just check your email and see if you can edit that file? I just created a file that you should be able to edit.
Okay.
And I sent it to everybody whose email I had. So, and if you put it in revision mode, that way everybody will know who makes what revisions.
Okay. Yeah, I've got it.
Excellent. Okay.
All right, thanks everyone for participating.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Joe.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.